We ready? Okay. First of all, thank you all for coming tonight to the Andalusia Institute 2021 Peacock Symposium talk featuring Daniel Wallace. Our executive director, Irene Burgess, couldn't be here tonight, so I'm Jordan Kofer. I'm doing the introduction in her stead, and also want to let you all know, first of all, thanks for coming, and we encourage you to wear masks indoors for tonight. Okay. In 1925, H.L. Mencken, who was a famous writer at the time, wrote his essay, The Sahara of the Beaux-Arts, where he talked about the South being the worst region of the United States. And he said that it was an artistic, intellectual, and cultural desert. The response that followed Mencken's essay was known as the Southern Renaissance, with wave upon wave of Southern artists coming out in response. And it gave us some of our most acclaimed authors of the 20th century, authors like William Faulkner, Eudora Welty, Robert Penn Warren, Richard Wright, and of course, Flannery O'Connor. And it highlighted the legacy of storytelling in the South. So it seems fitting that nearly 100 years after Mencken's comments, we're here to celebrate another Southern writer, Mr. Daniel Wallace, who serves as the J. Ross Macdonald Distinguished Professor of English at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he directs their creative writing program, and he's serving as the 2021 Andalusia Institute Peacock Symposium featured speaker. The Andalusia Institute was established to help promote the legacy of Flannery O'Connor, Georgia College alum, and highlight Southern literature in general. And Mr. Wallace's stories explore the power of storytelling, the fragile nature of relationships, and the blurry line between fact and fiction. I've been thinking about what are the similarities between Flannery O'Connor's fiction and Daniel Wallace's fiction, and I think both are filled with the bizarre. Stylistically, there's this, they both have this ability to see beauty and profundity and the grotesque. And then there's this key difference I've been thinking about biographically, which is that, Flannery O'Connor went from high school to college here at Georgia College and then to Iowa for University of Iowa for an MFA program, grad school for creative writing. While Wallace took a less traditional path. He worked odd jobs, including as a vet tech. He was an importer-exporter in Japan. He worked in a bookstore and as an illustrator for 13 years before he found success in writing. And he has found a lot of success. Another difference is in their output. When people say a writer is prolific, this is what they're talking about. Wallace has published 6 novels, beginning with his debut, Big Fish, in 1998. And that is a novel that's not only a beautiful and amazing novel, it's one that teaches really well, and my students always tend to love that novel. He's written, so I said 6 novels. His newest one is called Extraordinary Adventures, but he also has a new memoir that's coming out with Algonquin Books called This Isn't Gonna End Well. And I recently watched a clip on YouTube from him talking, reading from This Isn't Gonna End Well, and I can't wait to read it. Additionally, besides the 6 novels and the memoir, he's written a children's book called The Cat's Pajamas. He's co-authored a coloring book. He's written for several magazines, including The Bitter Southerner, Garden and Gun, and Our State magazine. He's published short fiction in over 50 literary magazines, including Tin House, Glimmer Train, the Georgia Review, and as we found out last night, one of our professors, Professor Seljan, in the creative writing program, actually published Wallace in one of these journals. So I thought that was a really cool connection. He's been working with film and short film and a lot of adaptation. And in 2003, his novel Big Fish was adapted into a movie directed by Tim Burton, and that was nominated for an Academy Award. And in 2013, it was adapted into a musical. He's won numerous literary awards, including the Harper Lee Award and the Sir Walter Raleigh Award, and he's had work collected in the Best American Short Stories and Best Stories for the South. So if you could give a warm Georgia College welcome for Mr. Daniel Wallace.
Hey y'all, how you doing? Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me out back? So great to be here. I wanted to come here for decades and was just waiting for an invitation. Finally got one, and it's been great. I've had such a great time. My hosts, Bruce and Brian and Tammy, Jordan, Peter, and the Andalusia Institute, I want to thank you all so much for making this great trip. I feel like I've only been here since last night, but I feel like I've been here much longer with everything I've gotten to see and learn. And meeting the students has been great as well. I'm just couldn't be happier, and I don't think it could go much better. So, I've been editing. Writers, of course, edit their work a lot, but even doing something like this, a talk, I've been editing up until the time to right now. Over the past week, I've changed completely what I was going to read to you tonight. I had a chapter that was in my memoir that's coming out. I don't really like to call it a memoir. It makes me feel really old. Like, how can you write a memoir when you're as young as I am? It's almost impossible. What could possibly have happened in that short span of time that could fill a book? But I did write it, and there was a chapter, one specific chapter that I really liked, and I still like it, that didn't make the cut. And I was going to do that tonight, and then I changed my mind. As good as it is, as good as I like to think it is, it just wasn't right for the book. And that happens a lot. Even material that you like or that could fit in a different book, perhaps, or a different set of stories, just doesn't fit in this particular one. I remember in my first book, Big Fish, there was a part that was edited out of it, and it was a joke. And there are a lot of jokes in that book, and this joke was about a cat, an old cat who lived in an alleyway behind a bar. And it lived eating the trash that was thrown out at night from the bar. And it lived a fairly good life and was getting old, and had this thought, the cat had this thought, which was, if the food that I'm getting out here is as good as it is, it must be even better in the bar. So one night at about midnight, the bartender was bringing out a bag of trash and opened the screen door to the alley. And as he did that, the cat made a run for the bar. But it was the screen door slammed shut really quickly and hit him in the back and severed its tail and died. The cat had a heart attack and just died right there. The bartender saw what had happened, and he picked up the cat and the cat's tail and set it back in the alleyway, and then went back to work. And around 2 o'clock that morning, around 2 a.m., the bartender was bringing out the last of the trash, and he was confronted by the spirit of this dead cat. And the cat was holding its tail. When a cat's a spirit, it can do things that it really can't do in real life. So he's holding its tail, and the cat said to the bartender, I'm dead, it's cool, not your fault, but I am wandering the cat afterlife um, because you have to have a tail to have any peace as a cat. And so if you would just do me the favor and reattach my tail, then I could live or die in peace. And the bartender looked at the cat spirit and said, you know, I would, but it's against the law to retail spirits after 1 a.m. So that was edited out of the book. I mean, I even edited my clothes for tonight. I had a whole different shirt I was going to wear, and I looked down, and there was a big chocolate stain on it. So I changed into this shirt, which I think is okay. I think it works. But again, just constantly changing. This piece that I'm going to read is nonfiction. It's about my mother, and it's a story about her, but it's really about storytelling, which my life is absorbed with, and it addresses really the great mystery of my own life, which is why I'm a writer. And I find that so much of what I do is this effort to understand why I'm one, because I still haven't completely figured it out. And this is, on one hand, it's about my mom, but on the other hand, like almost everything I do, it's about me. So I'm going to read it for you now. It's called Child Bride. My mother was 12 years old the first time she got married. Her husband, 17. This is how she told it anyway, over and over again, how she was married when she was 12 and her husband's name was John Stevens, and they ran off together to Columbiana, Alabama, where they found a judge who would marry them. Her maiden name was Joan Rangeley Pettigo. She was born in 1931, so this would have made it the summer of 1943, right in the middle of World War II. My mother was living with her parents, of course. She was, after all, 12 years old. So they couldn't and didn't know about the engagement, which occurred about 11 a.m., and the ceremony, which was around 3 p.m. The journey to Columbiana began in Edgewood, Alabama, about 30 miles away. That summer, my mother went to the community swimming pool almost every day, a vast rectangular tub of water, cloudy with chlorine. Swimming pools were the only escape from the weather. Very few homes were outfitted with air conditioners, and Alabama summers are cruelly hot and muggy. I know that y'all don't know anything about that. To have a pool full of tepid water, as chemically repellent as it must have been by July, was a godsend. My grandmother, Eva Pettigo, would drop Joan off in the morning with a sack lunch and a towel and not have to pick her up until later that afternoon. The lifeguard was the babysitter of hundreds of young children. But they weren't all children. John Stevens was there too, and he was 17 years old. We'd been going out for some time by then, my mother always said when she told this story. I never followed up with her about this or took time to really think what going out could possibly mean to a 12-year-old and a teenager. Going out was impossible. They could only see each other in public spaces like the pool or at school. She'd hang out by his car in the parking lot. She'd get in the car with him. They wouldn't do anything, she said, not then. But John, she said, was intent upon it. And eventually, so was she. And yet the relationship was kept a secret from everybody, from her friends and from his, and of course, from their parents. Edgewood, Alabama, where my mother grew up, was a quiet, solidly middle-class neighborhood, as it is to this day. It's on the outskirts of Birmingham, and in every way, practically idyllic. There are a lot of neighborhoods like this in Birmingham: Edgewood, Homewood, Mountain Brook, Crestline. that are really beautiful, clean, and safe, great places to raise your kids. Her father was a food distributor. Her mother worked part-time for him as his secretary and bookkeeper. One day, he would become wealthy enough to buy a 20-acre farm with cows and horses on it. He later installed his own par 3 golf course. But there was a disaster. The cows trampled the greens. He also built a tiny chapel, a little bit bigger than an outhouse, beside the pool. There was a miniature organ inside of it, a cross, and a beechwood kneeler covered in velvet. My grandparents were serious Presbyterians. As my mother told it, nobody knew they were anything other than friends, if they knew anything at all. They were just two people who went to the same school together and swam in the same community pool along with a lot of other kids. To hear my mother tell it, boys were always drawn to her. She said she couldn't help it, and I believed her. I had seen plenty of evidence by the time I was old enough to see and understand what was going on in her adult world, and yes, men were drawn to her. She was pretty, smart, and even when she was married to my father, somehow made herself seem available. And then later, when she was older and had dementia, she imagined that all men wanted her. Oh, how they wished they could have her. Men, she said, were animals. My grandfather adored my mother. When she was a child, they would go on walks together down Edgewood's sun-dappled streets, and when cars stopped at a sign or a light, he told her they were stopping to look at her because she was the prettiest girl in the world. My grandmother, Eva, took a different tack. She sensed in my mother her burgeoning womanhood, and it scared her. My mother was maturing much too quickly. And not just her body, but her way of being in the world and how the world saw her in it. Like Eula Varner in Faulkner's The Hamlet, as soon as she passes anything in long pants, she begins to give off something. You can smell it. Her mother could smell it too. This is how, inadvertently, my grandmother encouraged my mother to marry. I would rather stand over your grave, she told her, than to learn you had sex out of wedlock. I imagined my mother in bed, covers pulled up to her chin, wheels turning, my sweet grandmother towering above her, glowering in the shadowed light. So this, my mother said, is how it happened. They were at the Edgewood Community Pool, John and Joan. It was a Tuesday, and let's say, with the crazy logic of two kids who were in love and in the grip of some uncontrollable hormones, trying to find any way to be together, to have sex with each other and make it right, make it okay somehow, they decided to get married. And they decided to get married that very day. Still in their bathing suits, John drove them to the Shelby County Courthouse in Columbiana and stood before a probate, or whomever one stands before when a 17-year-old man is marrying a 12-year-old girl. And they took their vows, my mother still dripping in her suit, standing in one place long enough to lie about her age and sign her marriage license, a small pool of chlorinated water puddled at her feet. So, barefoot and newly married, Joan set out not to live as man and wife with John, because that wasn't going to happen, but to have sex as a newly married couple might, with a feral eagerness, but legally, and with the unintentional blessing of her mother. Where they had sex is unclear to me. My mother just said everywhere they could. And they continued thusly until somehow my grandparents found out about it and had the marriage annulled. It was a summer marriage, she said. This isn't classified information or a dark family secret I'm sharing with the world because I'm a writer and it makes a good story, although I am, and it does. If she were alive, if she were here, she would tell you. She told just about anybody. She told my younger sister on her 21st birthday because she said, we're friends now, not mother and daughter. Within hours of meeting Laura, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, she told her this story. Laura thought it was alarming. First impressions being what they are, that this is what my mother would want to lead with. On the other hand, it was a perfect story because it cut to the chase of the kind of woman my mother was and who she had always been: defiant, sexual, shocking. So everyone knew about it. It was her great tale of youthful misadventure. She was an open book like this. She would talk about anything, tell you about anything. The more outrageous, the better. If you had a scandalous story to tell, she would love to hear it, but she would have a better one. Like this one. And yours would pale in comparison. Married when I was 12 years old, beat that. She had too much fun telling the story and spared no details. If oversharing is something everyone in my family does, and it is, we definitely got it from her. She was a great storyteller and much more creative than I ever gave her credit for, because what I came to learn after a little bit of sleuthing is that it wasn't really true, the story she told. It didn't happen like this at all. Something you hear a lot when you start digging into the past of someone older, even the relatively recent past, there's always somebody who knows what you want to know, but they're dead. And now no one knows what really happened. The part of that life you want to know about is unknowable. Time disappears, is erased. Death precludes the future, corrodes the past. Without a witness, it's all hearsay, a story. Joni S. was one of my mother's best friends. She and my mother knew each other for decades. They became Buddhists together and went to northern Alabama and Florida on Buddhist retreats. She was my mother's best friend. Joni, other than Joni, there was no one left that I could talk to about this. Luckily, she knew exactly what had happened. Everything, pretty much. She knew the story because one day she was hanging out with my mother while my mother was cleaning out some drawers in a side table in the living room. This is when my mother was 48. Her second marriage to my father, almost over. In a drawer, there were a lot of old photographs, and one of them caught Joni's eye. "That's John Stevens," Joni said. A small black and white photo of a young, handsome man. "Why do you have a picture of John Stevens? He was 2 years behind me in high school. I didn't even know you knew him." "Oh, I knew him," my mother said offhandedly. "He was my first husband." This is when she told Joni the story she told me and everyone else. How when she was 12 and he was 17, they left the pool and drove down to Columbiana in their bathing suits, still dripping in the courtroom. The judge signed the papers and it was official. They were married. "That's what she told me," I said. "But there was no way she could have been 12 years old," Joni said. "She was 13 at least. And he was at most 16 because John was 2 years behind me in school. So I don't know where your mother got this. But maybe I'm wrong because she said it was true. She said it was in the law books as the earliest marriage ever performed in Alabama." Then Joni told me this. When her father found out about her getting hitched, he was not happy about it, as you can imagine. But even so, he wanted her to be happy. So he built a small house for them in the backyard. And she and John lived there until they went to Auburn, where they broke up and got divorced. And then, of course, she met your father. Wait, he built a house for them? In the backyard. She shrugged. She was shrugging because it was a fact, and if I didn't believe her, that was up to me. That's what she told me. "I don't know, Joni," I said. I don't know how that could have worked, because that would mean a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old, or a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old, as Joni said, high school students, or actually, in the case of my mother, one just leaving middle school, lived in my grandparents' backyard as husband and wife, having legal sex with each other. The idea of her having sex even once with this adult man is chilling. Sex that was sanctioned by her parents, unbelievable. My grandfather never would have built a house for her in the backyard. He would have shot him and built him a casket. Joni didn't know about any of that. She was just repeating what she'd been told. John Stevens was gorgeous, she said. I will say that. There's the gorgeous John Stevens. Now, talking to Joni, I'm beginning to understand that I don't even know what I know. The backyard home story is impossible. But Joni was my mother's best friend. Why would she tell her this? And yet clearly it was not a credible story. Now I don't know what else was made up, or if all of it was, or why this fictional creation of self, of a controversial and even tragic past that never happened, was necessary. Maybe she just loved how the story, like a car wreck, got your attention and made it impossible to look away. The sex part, of course, she loved. And the fact that it was against the law, even in Alabama, only made it better. She lied about her age to the judge and got away with it, and she loved that. The judge never even asked to see proof. She loved that too. Apparently, no one asked to see proof of anything, ever, until I did. One reason I write fiction as opposed to nonfiction until recently is the freedom the form allows me, which is almost total. I'm free to write the story I want to write, the way I want to write it, and if something displeases me or doesn't work, I can delete a word, a paragraph, or much, much more, all from the comfort of my office, couch, or bed. The only conflict I experience is on the page. I've never been much for research or being investigative, asking questions, insinuating myself into the real lives of other people. Who knows what might happen if I did? The conflict could get very real. But worse than that, it's limiting. The more facts I have, the less latitude I have to make things up. I get hamstrung by the truth. After Joni, though, I knew I needed to talk to John Stevens. Though the events in question happened over 60 years ago, and he well may have forgotten them, the bones of that memory covered by the sands of time. To hear from me, the son of the girl he once loved, could be, to say the least, jarring. But there he was, his telephone number, online where anyone could see it. His address was there as well. He still lived in Edgewood. This was all too wonderful, and yet a little unnerving. How would he react when I told him who I was? And when is the last time he'd even thought of her? Would he hang up on me or have a heart attack? Or would he just tell me the story I'd been hoping to hear? So I dialed him up, and it rang 2 or 3 times. He didn't answer, though. A woman did. It was, I assumed, his wife, his second wife. I asked for Mr. Stevens in my brightest voice. "Oh," she said, "I'm sorry. Mr. Stevens died 3 years ago. This is Estelle Stevens, his widow. Is there anything I can help you with?" She had a sweet, deeply Southern voice, and an old one. She had to have been 80, 85 years old at least. "Well," I said, "yes, possibly you can." I had not thought this through. I had no plan for Mrs. Stevens, what to ask her anything at all. But I had to make a plan now, what to do right now. And so I did. "My name is Daniel Wallace," I said. "My mother's name was Joan Pettigo. I don't know if you knew her." There was a short pause, or maybe not even a pause at all. Maybe I misinterpreted it, or my fictional inclinations were adding it there for effect. Maybe she was taking a sip of water or was distracted by a cardinal on the red berry bush outside her window. "Of course I remember Joan Pettigo," she said. "She and John were an item in high school." An item, I should say so. I soldiered on. "Well, that's what my mother told me." I was trying to sound as breezy as possible about it all, but she must have been wondering why Joan Pettigo's son was calling her. My mother's passed on as well. "She lived right down the street from where my house is now," she said. "My best friend lives in the house next door, so I see it all the time." "Oh," I said, "well, the reason I'm calling," and here's where I begin to stutter, not really knowing what the next words out of my mouth were going to be. There was a story I'd heard, and maybe not even a story, but I don't know, what would you call it? Something that had come up at some point or other. And I was wondering, and I was going to ask him, your husband, because what I might have heard was something about how he and my mother got married in high school, just briefly, really just for the summer. And this time, there was a long, thoughtful silence. "That's odd," she said. "Well, they were an item," and she laughed a little laugh. "But nothing like that ever happened. I can tell you that. I can tell you that for certain. We were married for nearly 60 years. In all that time, I think something would have come up about it, once or twice. Don't you?" She was so sweet about this and so sure of things. It was refreshing. "Yes," I said, as quickly as I possibly could. "Of course, I didn't think it happened. It sounded so far-fetched, but I didn't know who else to call. I'm sorry I bothered you, but it was something I just needed to clear up for myself." "I understand," she said. "Thank you." I was ready to hang up, but she went on. "The timing doesn't work out," she said, "because we were married right after high school, and I definitely think someone would have brought it to my attention." "Exactly," I said. "Clearly it never happened, and I'm sorry. And when did you hear this?" she said. "I don't even know," I said. I felt like I was chipping away at her life little by little, that I might be changing the way she thought about her husband forever. I said, "At some point, my mother brought it up, but my mother said a lot of things about a lot of things, and a lot of them weren't necessarily true." Joan Pettigo was a firecracker, she said. That's for sure. That's for sure. Firecracker or not, though, my mother had never been married to John Stevens. I believed Estelle completely. I had brought my mother's lies into an old widow's life. A good woman, probably, and I felt as if I'd done something terribly wrong. I wondered if my mother had ever married anybody, if she had ever been a child bride at all, if the whole thing had been her fiction, just a way of getting attention, of celebrating her indifference to convention. Yet I couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe Estelle didn't know. Maybe they'd been crafty enough to hide it from everybody. Within a week, I found someone to do some digging, a sort of private investigator. And it turns out, yes, my mother did get married. She was a child bride, but not to a man named John Stevens, and not when she was 12. The man she married was named John Sorsby, a man I'd never heard of in my life, and she was 15 years old. Rick Dice, that's his real name, is a writer living in Alabama, and he knows how to find a paper trail. Being a writer myself, I should have known this, or hoped for it at the very least, that it would all come down to paper. After all, has anything happened in the last few hundred years that hasn't left a paper trail behind it? And paper gets the last word. Contracts, electricity and telephone bills, notes, diaries, these are the things that tell our stories. Memories are faulty, people die, and the living ones are often averse to the truth. But at the end of the day, if there's a piece of paper you can hold up and say, this is true, this is what happened, this is where he was on the day in question, the mystery will be a mystery no more. This story I'm telling you now, for instance, though it's full of inaccuracies and conjecture, will end up being the last word on the subject. No one is coming after me to adjust or correct it. This is what will be known as history. What you don't know could fill a book, my father used to tell me, but he underestimated me. I have actually filled 6 books so far with what I don't know, and I'm working on the 7th. Rick said he would be happy to help me. All I had to do was give him a name and a birth date. So I told him, and he did it. This man I'd never met found the paper I needed. Joan Pettigo, he told me, married my father on the 27th of October, 1950, when they were both students at Auburn. This much I knew. But a Joan Pettigo also marries on July 29th, 1947. She would have been 15. And the man she married, he told me, wasn't named John Stevens. His name was John R. Sorsby. I'm guessing the marriage was annulled because she's back in high school in fall 1949, and her name is Joan Pettigo and not Joan Sorsby. Not 12 years old, 15, and not John Stevens, John Sorsby. This didn't make sense at all. Why would my mother have lied about how old she was when she first got married? Or if there was going to be a lie, wouldn't she have lied in the other direction? If you were married at the age of 12, wouldn't you want to bump it up a little? Say possibly 15? 15 is young, really young to be married, but not really that rare. She may have known other girls who were married at 15, but 12? Who gets married when they're 12? Hardly anyone. Maybe no one. No one but Joan Pettigo, the earliest marriage ever performed in Alabama. Not one of the youngest, the youngest. She had distinguished herself early on. Maybe that's what she was trying to get at, that of all the wild, she was the wildest. But who is this Sorsby? Why would she lie about his name? And how does it even make sense? No one had ever mentioned a John Sorsby, while it had been established that John Stevens was very real. Joni had even known him, had seen his picture in my mother's drawer, and his widow had known Joan Pettigo, knew her husband had dated her, but were never, ever married. I didn't really believe Mrs. Stevens when I spoke to her, I told myself then, when she denied the first marriage. I thought that somehow her husband of half a century had hidden the fact from her all these years. But she was right. It wasn't Stevens, her husband. It was Sorsby. All I needed to know now is whether John Sorsby was still alive, because I wanted to talk with him if he was. Rick promised to find that out for me. It only took 2 days. You were asking about Sorsby and if he might be alive, he wrote. The John Sorsby who appears to have married your mother was born April or May 1929, the son of John Sorsby and a woman named Vernell Pilkington. Vernell Pilkington, which may be the best name ever of a real person. Vernell Pilkington. Then he seems to disappear until he marries your mom. Then he seems to disappear again. He doesn't appear in any city directory, doesn't pay a power bill or a phone bill, doesn't register to vote or serve in the military. He's off the grid. But Pilkington, Vernell Pilkington, I realized I'd seen that name before. And so Rick proceeds to unravel the story of my mother's first husband's name. Vernell Pilkington's husband was John Sorsby, and they had a son together, also named John. But then they were divorced, and she later married a man named Aubrey Beck Stevens. He became John Sorsby's stepdad. And so John changed his name to Stevens and became John Stevens. See, Rick said, John Stevens and John Sorsby are one and the same. John Sorsby was born April 1929, and so was John Stevens. And they both died on the 25th of April, 2010. I could almost hear him smiling on the other end of this email, having figured all this stuff out from top to bottom. She did marry John Stevens. But that summer day they married in the small courthouse in the middle of Alabama, he must have still been John Sorsby. And so, just like that, in a matter of days, the mystery of a lifetime was solved. I have it all on paper now. The original marriage license and the annulment, every historical date, every indisputable fact. But it's more than paper. Nestled within what is supposed to be a bloodless legal document, there's a hidden narrative. The marriage wasn't discovered, and I don't know how it finally was until an entire year had passed, a year in which my mother lived at home and appeared to be dating John while he was, in fact, her husband. Once discovered, though, my grandfather moved quickly to have it annulled, which meant that, legally at least, the marriage almost never happened at all. The annulment document contains 3 testimonies, one from my mother, one from John Sorsby, and one from my grandfather. In his testimony, my grandfather says that John had called on my daughter since the alleged marriage, and I have seen no difference in their relation. They have acted toward each other the whole time like kids' sweethearts usually do. There has been nothing intimate in their relation. And John Sorsby says, last July, it occurred to me that if we would go through with a marriage ceremony, that it would prevent her from going out with other boys. And being somewhat jealous, we drove to Columbiana. Neither of us had any intention of considering this any more than a binding engagement. And our relations have been nothing other than that of fiancé and fiancée. Finally, it's my mother's turn. She says she and John have been friends for quite a while, and we had discussed getting marriage in the future for some time. Last July, he suggested that we could go to a county seat and get married, and that it would have the effect of an engagement, and we could later remarry. They acted toward each other the whole time, like kids' sweethearts usually do, my grandfather said. There was nothing intimate in their relation at all. Nothing intimate in their relation at all. Well, I doubt that. And you might well ask, why do I even care? But that's not the question. The question is, why did she care? Why did she lie about it the way she did? That's the most intriguing part of it all to me. Because what really happened is only important to the degree it differs from the story she told. And the story she told is the important one. We learn more about people through the lies they tell than we do from the truth they share. I think this is why I became a fiction writer in the first place. It's how I was raised. Thank you. So that was a hoot to write and to find out about all that stuff about my mom. It's just, who would have thought? And then thinking about it later, which I don't return to in this piece, is his second wife really a secret that was kept for over 50 years from her? I don't know how that's possible. If you go online, you can see the marriage certificate between the two of them. I doubt that she went online to try to check it out. But to me, it doesn't, it matters. It's just the fact that a secret can maintain itself for that long, Anyway, that's the story of my mom. Does anybody have a question about any of this, anything, any objections, any stories they want to share along the same lines? Anybody married here at 12? Mm-hmm. They were married for a year. Yeah. Got married a year later, annulled. Marriage, not divorced, annulled. Well, if there are no questions, thank you so much for coming. I had a great time. Thank you.